to defend Julian Assange has organised. Now, although we're not massive in number, there's a respectable number of us, but we should remember that all over the world people are organising solidarity actions and events for Julian's 50th birthday. He has mass support in the world. People stand by him in the rest of the world, and especially in those countries that have experienced the horrors and terrors of imperialist war. The mass of people, as I say, want to set Julian Assange free. So today we've called this event to defiantly celebrate his 50th birthday, because we want him to know inside those walls, those vile walls, that we are with him, that we will never give up this struggle until we see him as a free man, free to return to his life and to his family and to his work. We will not allow this fight to be plunged into darkness by lying governments and lying corporate media. We will continue to shine a light on this man, this brave man, and the cause he has sacrificed so much of his life for, the right of the public to know the truth about the US, British and other NATO countries' war machines. A war that kills, tortures, uses rendition, uses drone assassinations, uses mass bombings and oppresses millions of people all over the world, most of them the poorer people of this planet. We salute Julian's courage. When he and WikiLeaks released the truth about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, the collateral murder video, Guantanamo, the diplomatic cables, all the war crimes, all the corruption, all the torture, he knew what the consequences could be. Despite 11 years of injustice, frame-ups, smears, arbitrary detention, unfair judicial processes, psychological torture, unable to continue his work, isolated, separated from his family and loved ones, Julian Assange endures. And we are here to celebrate that fact and to celebrate the work he has done. He has become a symbol of the fight against injustice and the fight for truth, because truth is the enemy of empires. Absolute enemy of empires is truth. They ceaselessly pump out propaganda day and night, hundreds of thousands of pieces of propaganda, which we know better as just plain old lies. Day and night they hit the populations of the world, these fabrications and lies, where the imperialist governments who are bombing somebody in some part of the world or holding a journalist in this prison tell us that they're for human rights. That's lie number one. We know that to be not true. Now, on Wednesday past, Donald Rumsfeld, aged 88, one of the main architects of the US, British and other countries' 2003 war in Iraq, died.
Burn in hell!
He died.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
burn in hell.
he died of old age, surrounded by his family and loved ones, and with newspapers reporting how wonderful his career had been. The war in Iraq that he started with others today, as we saw a few days ago, continues, with President Biden ordering the bombing of parts of Iraq and Syria. This is 18 years after the invasion of Iraq was sold to us on a web of lies. And it's worth thinking back to that, because in 2003 we were told that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And there was a dossier produced here in Britain by Alistair Campbell, who's apparently now a TV personality, and Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair, who is apparently now, by what means I don't know, a billionaire, jetting around the world, said that weapons of mass destruction could reach London in 45 minutes. Yeah, they've never found the weapons of mass destruction. But they spent so long selling this war to the public. And Colin Powell, who was the US Secretary of State, theatrically held up a vial in the United Nations saying that it was anthrax, and that in Iraq there was mass production of anthrax going on. And so the invasion and the war and the occupation and the killings and the bombings and the torture began, and is estimated to have caused almost 500,000 deaths just there in that country. Leave aside the rest of the Middle East. Now, as Julian said when he was introducing the collateral murder video, he said there was murder, there was death on every corner. That wasn't an isolated example. There was death on every corner in Iraq going on. Now, amongst his other crimes, Donald Rumsfeld issued a special order, it's called Frago 242, disclosed in WikiLeaks' Iraq war logs that there was to be no investigation of torture that was not directly carried out by US personnel. In fact, there wasn't really any investigation of torture that was carried out by US personnel. But that was the order, and so they subcontracted quite large parts of the torture to the Iraqi forces that they were cultivating. And they, in general, in their torture programs, they used whipping with chains, hanging from the ceiling by wrists and ankles, sexual assault, drills, burning with boiling water, and many more wicked methods. And Donald Rumsfeld was also the architect of Guantanamo and of the US torture program. The world should ask the question, who should have been imprisoned? Who should be imprisoned after the Iraqi invasion and occupation? Donald Rumsfeld, Bush, Cheney, our very own Tony Blair? Yes, but the war criminals walk free. Who have they locked up? They've locked up the truth teller about their war crimes. That's who they've got locked up. And I would know, if I was living in a better world, and I certainly hope to see a slightly better world before I kick the bucket, I would know that it would be a better world if the people behind the walls of Belmarsh were Cheney, Bush, Blair, and so on. Yes. And we could come and shout rude slogans at them because they caused millions of deaths throughout the Middle East and continuing deaths throughout the Middle East. And I would say it would be good if we could throw into Belmarsh the arms dealers, the arms merchants, the merchants of death. And they swank about at cocktail parties in silk suits and public school ties. They are murderers. They are merchants of death. Let's throw them in there as well. And let's get Julian Assange out of there. Free Assange! At Julian's extradition hearing, Khaled Elmaazi was due to appear as a defence witness, but the prosecution objected, and then there were those miraculous technical difficulties that seem to always happen during the court cases. And bravely, Julian stood up and shouted that he would not allow a torture victim to be censored and silenced. And this was from his glass box he's locked in at the back of the court. Elmaazi was arrested and kidnapped by the CIA rendition team, who cut off his clothes, put him in a nappy, put a bag over his head, put earmuffs on him, and flew him off to a torture chamber. During his captivity, he was severely beaten. He was sodomized. He was shackled and hooded and subjected to every form of sensory deprivation. He was released after 5 months and went back to Germany, where the authorities refused to believe that this had happened to him. his lawyer's office was bugged. Is this starting to look familiar? And his lawyers were threatened. In 2010, it became clear what pressures had been placed on the Germans to take the position they took. One of the Cablegate cables tells us that the USA had gone to see the Germans and said to them that if they issued international arrest warrants for the rendition team, it would have a negative impact on US-German relations. And the Germans ceased activity at that point.
But it's
Cowards!
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the
Elmaazi later went on to say, it has been the journalists and investigators informed by the WikiLeaks documents that have been able, through the painstaking and diligent work, to corroborate my story. That is what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have given the world, a glimpse behind the curtain of deceit, not at a few isolated war crimes, but the systematic nature of those war crimes. And that is why they hate him. And many states, the US, the UK, Australia, Sweden, Ecuador, and more, have lined up against him for the past 11 years. And their campaign, their allies in this campaign, have been the campaign to stifle truthful journalism has been the corporate media and the journalists within the corporate media, led, I have to say, by The Guardian,
yes,
who we had great pleasure in picketing a couple of times. I'd be very happy to go there and picket them any day of the week. Because they have spread. You know, there's a lot of little factories of people churning out anti-Assange messages, and there have been for the last 11 years, and smears. And the newspapers have recycled those, so that large masses of the British population, when we started campaigning, really were very suspicious about Julian Assange. That has been swung round by dedicated international and national campaigning. John Pilger has said of the distortions of reality, he said this, I often quote it because I think it's really good. The times we live in are so dangerous and so distorted in public perception that propaganda is no longer an invisible government, it is the government. It rules directly without fear of contradiction, and its principal aim is the conquest of us, our sense of the world, our ability to separate truth from lies. That's a very, very important point.
Brilliant.
And I'll come back to it briefly. The case against Julian Assange, as we all know, is a political frame-up. It has no substance. It has further unravelled in the past week or so as one of the FBI's witnesses, Sigurdur Thoroddsen, has admitted that he lied in his evidence. Evidence claiming that Julian Assange had hacked documents in Iceland. Thoroddsen is an ideal witness for the FBI. He's a convicted paedophile, he's a serial fraudster, and he's been diagnosed as a sociopath. So, you know, the FBI thought, that's the man for us. That's the man we'll use against Julian. Thoroddsen, the charge based on Thoroddsen's evidence was introduced only 6 weeks before the extradition hearing. The defence had no time to gather their evidence on these matters and what he was saying. But Media Lens has done a search across all the media to see who has reported this unravelling of part of the case against Julian Assange. None have reported it. None of the significant media outlets have reported it. And in fact, I would recommend Craig Murray, and I think he's here, excellent article on this case, on Thoroddsen and what this means. Craig, as we know, is himself facing a frame-up in Scotland, and we send our solidarity to him. That's staunch support. Craig is rare, a rare truth teller, and his articles and the articles in the independent media have helped to stop the darkness have spread some light about the case of Julian Assange. I want to end by saying something about Britain, because we are here. We have to say something about it. It's a rather depressing place, really. I want to just say this. We're sometimes transfixed by the sheer military might of the USA and its vast resources that it devotes to killing people all over the world, and coup-making and murderous sanctions and so on. But we should not forget the British state. The British state has a long imperialist record. It's a pioneer of colonial rule, coup-making, wars against those fighting for freedom in what were then the British colonies. It was instrumental in setting up the State of Israel, which it continues to arm and support fully as that state massacres Palestinians and denies them all rights. In fact, the British are in Israel at the moment training jointly with the Israeli Defense Force. They help to train and they do joint training. So we know what they're responsible for. But the British were also pioneers of the torture techniques used in the Middle East by the USA. They pioneered those techniques in the 6 counties of Ireland, where they were in military occupation, and in 1972 they rounded up hundreds of men and stuck them in jail. They didn't have a trial, it was just internment without trial. And they picked 14 of those men to be their torture guinea pigs. And those men are now called the Hooded Men. You may have seen them in the film Eminent Monsters. You may have seen a couple of weeks ago. They're very old men, and they're still fighting for justice. They're still fighting against what was done to them, because they suffered sensory deprivation, hooding, loud noise played to them, stress positions, beatings, and other tortures. They were permanently psychologically damaged by this, and they are still fighting for justice. And the USA looked at the British torture program. I'm sure they discussed it at some high-level torture meeting, and thought that's what we'll do. We'll use that. And so the British invented those forms of torture.
Shame on United Kingdom!
Britain is seen as just a junior partner today, but it's a strong, wealthy imperialist power, and it has certainly proved its worth to them in the case of Julian Assange, using every possible trick in the book to get him extradited to the USA. And today it is continuing to fight wars all over the world with its special forces. We just don't know about them because the media never tells us about them. Read Declassified UK. You'll see all the details of where Britain's special forces are. I think we should minimally demand that we know where our state is at war, where our state is committing acts of barbarity in the rest of the world. So I want to end by saying that I think worse is to come. I'm sorry to be depressing. I know we've just had birthday cake and that, but worse is to come, because Britain, alongside the USA, with other NATO countries, is building towards wars with Russia and China. The propaganda against China is so relentless that that few realise just a fact about the Chinese military budget, which is a quarter the size of the USA's, and it's only 3 times bigger than Britain's, and Britain is a tiny country and China is a very big country. Britain is increasing its nuclear arsenal, as are many of the NATO partners, by 40%. It is staging provocations in the China Seas and the Black Sea, where we saw Russia fire warning shots at a British vessel. These are nuclear powers. This is what's being taunted by the British and the USA and the rest of NATO. A war between nuclear powers will be catastrophic for all humanity, which is already, as we can see in Canada at the moment, where hundreds of people are dying in fires and heat that have been caused by climate change. And our governments are countenancing a nuclear war. So when Julian Assange said, "This is not about me, it's about you," He was absolutely right. If we want peace, if we want to prevent further catastrophic wars, then we have to fight imperialism. And part of that fight will be an information war. We need to know what our rulers are doing and planning. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks gave us the model for that. We must win the battle to free Julian, not only for him, but for ourselves and for the future of humanity. Free Julian!
Free Julian Assange!